Hello, everyone. Welcome to Arash's World. Today we have a special guest. We have Jill Amy Sager. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Oh, for sure. And so, what we usually start off with is the toughest question first. Can you briefly describe yourself to our audience here? What would you say, any way you see fit? How would you describe yourself? Again, briefly. That's also the challenge.
That's a great question. We all have such full lives, right? Well, I guess briefly I'll say this. I am a person who was born in the Bronx, New York City, in a very traditional family. But when I was 18, somebody gave me a set of tarot cards. This is in the 70s. I started to study. I took to them, never expecting to become a professional tarot reader, never expecting to do, I mean, who did that? And yet word of mouth spread, and now I have clients all over the world. To add to that, and I think because I was a musician, I looked this up later in terms of right brain function, creativity, being a musician, etc., and opening up to a pictorial modality like tarot, I started channeling information from the universe. And you can see, or maybe you can hear I'm kind of smiling a bit and maybe laughing again, unexpectedly. But my personality, a little bit about me, obviously, is to say yes to things. And I took in this loving source and have used it for myself. And now I use it with clients.
Oh, wonderful. And there's some things I want to talk to you about tarot cards in a bit and when I started and how I got started. But I want to let everyone know that you have a magnificent book, Guidance from the Universe, Hopeful Messages for Everyday Challenges. And I'd like to talk about your book here a bit. And I also love, apart from the universe, I mean, that's important, but the hopeful part. Hope.
Mm.
I think that is so important. So, what would you say? What is your book about? What are you trying to express here, and what are some of the insights that you would like to share here with our audience?
I what I started to when I started hearing these messages, they were loving, they were wise, way wiser than I am. I'm not a philosopher. I don't have a degree in religious studies, but I was so taken and I started to transcribe messages. The book came about because at some point, working with clients who were really taking to these messages, hopeful messages about hope, about suffering, about money and about loss and these kinds of topics, I thought, maybe I'll just transcribe these. I put them in my computer. At that point, the universe said to me, "Do you think that we just gave this for you?" I was like, "Yeah, thank you." But they were like, "No." And I was already writing things. Anyway, the point is, I thought, okay, I'll write a book. I know that that could get out to more people, right? But it's then that I decided to write my personal stories that demonstrate how I used the information. I and that right now, the book's been out since January, and that's what people are responding to, which is a big surprise to me. I really thought that they would tune in to Guidance's messages because they're in every chapter, 30 chapters on these topics. But instead, what I'm finding is that people are finding my stories hopeful. My stories, this is what I'm being told, resonate with people, and they demonstrate. You asked about hope. They demonstrate, unbeknownst to me, a very hopeful attitude about life, how my own struggles, my personal struggles, can be transformed. And so that is surprising to me because I think, when we tell our own stories, whether it's in a book or just talking to people, people don't always relate, and yet these stories I'm being told are relatable, and that is what it sounds like is giving people hope for themselves to realize that um, I didn't remain a victim to growing up physically disabled. I had a lot of challenges. I didn't remain angry about it, even though my parents made decisions that weren't actually didn't help me very much. I didn't remain bitter about my life. And this is how, I guess, what I'm being told, this is what's coming through in the book.
Absolutely. So much I want to talk about, but also the fact that what you're talking about, it's a personal and lived experience. And
Yes.
that resonates with people. And mainly it resonates because it's authentic. And we like that. We like that kind of connection with authenticity. You don't, it's not an academic discipline. It's not something that you study the theory of. Like, it's not something, it's not a dogma where you're trying to convert people. It's a lived experience that we can all benefit from too, because we see ourselves in various of those struggles that you're talking about, or again the hope that sometimes we feel is missing. And I'm part of a French philosophy group, and just yesterday we talked about beauty, and then the importance how people who remain youthful and are beautiful because they also have this inner beauty, and they're also like hopeful. They're also like have this light that they're shining through, and it shows in their faces and in the way they look. And again, no matter what the age, there's beauty coming both from within and without, and that kind of alignment that you have. And that's just one thing, and it's not the most important thing when we're talking about beauty, but I think that shows us how important it is that there is this spiritual aspect that we need to foster, develop in a positive direction. Again, in a direction that is hopeful and gives us power, nourishes us, etc.
I love the way you put that. It is so true. I mean, perception, this is what I learned. Perception is everything. How we perceive ourselves, how we perceive the
Mm-hmm.
world. The
Mm-hmm.
first chapter in my book is called Awareness is All. I mean, they
Mm-hmm.
gave me those words, those exact words. But of course, what I've come to learn is that if I am not aware, like for example, and this is in the book, right? One of the examples, if I'm at a stop light and I am pissed off at the guy in front of me who's in a car who he didn't signal. I can't even remember exactly what happened that day, but I was just behind him at a red light. I was just fuming. And suddenly I became aware that all that anger and all that judgment and all of that, not just what it was doing to him, but what it was doing to me and the world at large, putting that out. And I immediately just stopped. I took a few deep breaths. I ended up feeling so much lighter in myself. And then I very suddenly and spontaneously became very compassionate.
Mm-hmm.
And I immediately thought, wait a minute, what if this guy's a new driver? What if he is an older person and or just, whatever, people have days, he just forgot to signal. It's not that big a deal. And to feel, more compassion suddenly from just letting go of this perception of what I was feeling inside, all this
Mm-hmm.
anger and bitterness and just those kind of changes, that kind of awareness for me is what changes everything. And I don't mean to sound too, maybe, it changes everything for me.
Mm-hmm.
Everything changes everything.
Mm-hmm. And it's also like not everything is personal, and even if it were, it doesn't matter because again, I've learned some to expand my views and say, okay, well, if this person is like cutting me off, so what? It's not the end of the world, you know. And it's we are overreacting to things because again, there's this probably trauma, these like negative experiences that we have within us. But I love how you're saying yes and yes to things. And just going
Yeah.
back to my experience of tarot cards, I was 16 at the time. It was my French teacher who actually did like a reading for some of the students. And my first card was a death card too. And he told me to calm down. It's like you're young, you gotta live a long time. It's not always that. And but I was intrigued by it. And then he said, "Oh, you know, I'm new to this too. I just went and bought this book, and the cards come with a guidebook, and you can buy it at this place." And so I could have had fear and say, no, I'm not going to continue. This is not for me. I said yes to it. And I've been
Oh,
practicing it for, again, as since then. And I'm fascinated by it. And I think it's that the willingness to embrace something that's different, out of the ordinary, but somehow it resonates with us. And maybe that was some of the universe saying, hey, yes, yes, say yes to this. Don't continue this path, you know? So
That's
don't be afraid
fabulous.
of it. That's it.
Yeah, that's fabulous. Well,
Mm,
I think that tarot draws us in one with my experience, I think because it does shine a light on who we are.
mhm,
I
mhm,
think one of the precepts I learned many years ago was, know thyself, right? It's kind of what I was talking
yeah,
about awareness, being more aware of what I'm doing, in life and how I'm carrying myself, et cetera, like that. And tarot does that. And that's why I think we're all drawn to it. We immediately feel like it sees us, it knows us. These cards are helping
exactly.
us unblock, to
Yeah,
notice things about ourselves because ultimately, isn't it really, um, for me, what I've learned? I didn't know this when I was much younger, right? But through tarot and this energy I channel, ultimately what I've learned is that everything, and this is not an ego thing, but everything does start with me. It's
mhm,
like I
of course.
describe with the car. If I'm having a bad day, it affects everything. And so I think that's why I love tarot too, and why I took to it because it really is it really shows us more of who we are. It holds up the mirror to us
Mhm,
rather than holding it out into the world and saying, it's your fault and these things are happening. Because, like you said, absolutely, we're all triggered by
mhm,
things. We grow up, and I don't know how it was for you, but I wasn't really given the opportunity to dig into my emotions as a child.
mhm,
I grew up at a time you can see from if some of you maybe you can't see, but I have gray hair. And I'm an older person. I'm 68 now. I grew up at a time when kids were seen and not heard. It's very different today, perhaps. And, if you had an emotion, nobody really wanted to deal with it in my family. So I had to learn many things as an adult about myself. And I have really, through Tarot and guidance, they've really helped me to, expand my own understanding about what it takes to be a human being.
I see that as the perfect counselor too, because it's like not only does it really know you already, but it also knows what would happen if you take certain steps. And I like that openness too. And a lot of misconceptions is that it's going to tell you what's going to happen. So you get the death card, yeah, it's like, okay, that's it. Yeah, it's over. No, it doesn't work that way. And it's also we have a say in it. And I think I do like, and I want to talk also about destiny and see what you think about that. I think there is a part that is not within our control, but I think like a lot of it is our choices that we make, that we need to make, the way we respond to things, the paths that we do take in our lives. And that's also the whole journey of like the learning experience of taking that path. And we often make mistakes, which is fine because that's again the learning experience. But then you have that wise friend of yours telling you, well, you want to try this path because this is actually better for you. And we don't usually get that, but here we have this like perfect combination of different things coming together. And it's not going to tell you, oh, yeah, yes, you're going to get sick and that's going to happen, that's going to happen. No, there's a lot of things that are within our control.
Absolutely. I so agree. I mean, I always say, especially to first-time clients, I'm like, I'm not a guru. I am not here
Mm-hmm.
to tell you what to do.
Exactly.
I'm here
Yeah.
to help you help yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I totally am with you. We have, and I always say this to clients too, you have free choice, free will. I,
Mm-hmm.
I even say this about the universe because I know other people who channel. I know other people who want to learn how to open up to the universe and get messages from the other side of the veil, whatever that is, whether it's an ancestor, a spirit guide, whatever it is. And I always say, look, I don't take everything that even they say 100%.
Mm-hmm.
And just because they say, yeah, maybe do that, it's got to resonate with me, right? It's
Yes.
got to
Yes.
be my truth. And I think we have to be very careful in this realm of, um, I don't want to say spirituality, but in this realm where more and more people, and I'm going to say it,
Mm-hmm.
more and more people are working with tarot cards, more and more people are getting into this. I mean, the number of tarot readers unlike when I started in the 70s, I can't even keep track. The
Mm-hmm.
number of tarot decks out there you can no longer keep track of because people are self-publishing. The New York Times, Wall Street Journal, people are talking about this in very favorable terms now.
Mm-hmm.
And from my experience, what I see is that there are am I going to use the word charlatans? That's a terrible
Mhm.
word, but everywhere, right? Whether it's in a religious setting or a Buddhist setting or this setting, which is an alternative, spiritual kind of path. So I just, always want to let people know you have free choice, free will. And if you're going to a reader who's telling you, um, you know, advising you this is what you have to do, or it's negative, as you said, looking at that death card and saying, oh, someone in your family is going to die, you might want to think twice
Yeah, yeah,
about that reading because that's not actually what Tarot is for.
yeah.
And as you said, there's a lot of misconceptions about what Tarot truly is for. When I
Yeah.
have clients that ask me, will, and they do, will so and so, I don't know, just I'll use a name, will Sam come back to me? I really love him. And I say to them, not my business to tell you. If I tell you he will, and he doesn't, you'll be disappointed. And if I tell you he will, you're going to live your life with this expectation. What's the point of that? The point in life is to enjoy the journey, figure out what's going on for yourself. Mostly what I do at that point is tell the person, well, maybe let's talk, let me do a reading to figure out why this is so important to you
Mhm.
and bring it back to that person in terms of trying to figure out why they're hanging on to this so much. That is it in it is it into is it interfering with their life? Is it interfering with their ability to move forward, et cetera, et cetera? So that's kind of where I move the needle a little bit.
I love that. And I think, yes, you're absolutely right. There are frauds there. There are charlatans out there in anything, in any field, and anywhere, right? So, but
Yeah.
again, that's important to listen to your gut feeling as well, your intuition. What does
Yes.
that tell you?
Yes.
And then if somebody's telling you what to do, I immediately just like shut down because I was like, no, this is probably not going to work. They might even be right, but it's like, let me figure it out for myself.
Right. I always say, it's about 3 days now for me on average. If I get advice like that, do this or
Uh,
guide,
uh,
the
uh.
universe will say, I sit with it, does it exactly until it
It
resonates
might
and
be a
make
parental thing too, because that's, we're
right.
told to do things and we're like, hey, wait a minute, take a break, right? Let me think about it. But
Okay.
I think one of the things also with when we look at religion, when we talk about a deity or God, and it often comes with conditions, and it's like, do this and you will get this, but if you do that, then you'll be punished. But when I think of the universe and the way I perceive it, the universe has our back and has my back. And so when that person that I want to be with, it doesn't work out, there's a reason behind it. Again, no matter how much effort I'm going to put in, there's like this kind of block there, perhaps, because it's not for my good. And I see this afterwards, like sometimes years after, it's like, oh, I see this like terrible thing that happened to me, or this thing that was out of my reach. It happened for a reason. And we don't often get that feeling that we are being supported. And I think we are. I think uh, all the time there is something there that is like a guardian angel that is protecting us from bad things happening and bad decisions that we're prone to make.
Totally. I was looking at my book on that chapter, letting go. I think that,
Mm,
what you're saying is so accurate. We it's in our nature as humans to hold on. That's security.
yeah.
And it's much harder to let go and
Mhm.
to just allow for what is, as you're saying. And then in hindsight, yeah, just see, that maybe, yeah, like and maybe you'll figure it out or maybe you won't. But mostly what I've also experienced as you're describing, I mean, we're so in sync in this way, which I had no idea. So that this is just lovely to talk to you. But what I've discovered is that if I'm holding on to something tightly, especially something that is toxic to me, that isn't good for me, when I let it go, it's as if when you said, the universe has your back, what I've noticed, and this happens all the time, is that I am basically saying to myself, this is how I perceive it, I love myself more.
Mhm.
I am not going to put up with XYZ, right? I love myself
Mhm.
more.
Mhm.
And it's almost as if when I say that, that's when the universe has our back.
Mhm.
Because what guidance keeps telling me, and that's what I call it, by the way, this universe energy, I just call guidance because it
Mhm.
means help. That's it.
Mhm.
But I'm so used to calling it guidance. I call it
Mhm.
guidance, this help. And because what I am getting from them all the time is that humans, we make it hard. What really our birthright is to be in joy, to live a happy life, a contented life, a life where we're not suffering. And unfortunately, suffering gets our attention. It kicks our ass and
Mhm,
it gets our
mhm.
attention. And when we're happy and joyful, we kind of take it for granted. It's just
Yeah,
human nature.
yeah.
So I kind of feel like the universe is always there saying to me, when I take another step, another level up and say, you know what? That relationship's abusive, or I'm not going to do that anymore, or that job is toxic and I really need to find another job, or whatever it is that's bringing me down and pulling my energy inward without this feeling of light and expansiveness. And, as I described before, even in the car, just this different energy of love and acceptance. When I make that shift to that, I always notice it's then the universe brings me something better.
Mhm.
I
Yeah,
actually,
yes,
it's all, I get rewarded.
yes,
And you know that in tarot, for those of you who are listening or into tarot, one of the hardest cards is not the devil card, it's the tower.
yeah,
The tower is that kick in the ass. I think the
yeah,
Buddhists, I'm not a Buddhist, so forgive me if you are,
mhm,
but I think the Buddhists describe it as, when you get too complacent,
yeah,
things can happen to shake you up.
yeah.
But what are the three cards that come after that tower? Where we are brought to the tower being a card that brings us to our knees of
Mhm,
suffering, a
mhm,
lot of times a kick in the ass from the outside world, something terrible, our partner wants a divorce suddenly, whatever. We lose a job. But if we go through that that period without as you and I are describing, with self-awareness, without the blame, without the um, victimization, pulling ourselves away from that somehow with help and support, whatever it takes to love ourselves through it, to see the positive, to find the hope, to have more faith, then the next three cards are the sun, the stars, and the moon.
mhm,
Don't think you have to know anything about tarot to know that is those are gifts from the universe, right? That's
mhm.
like wow. So so these principles that we're talking about, I believe, are universal. What I wrote in my book, in my introduction, I say specifically what I'm offering isn't new information. It just might be a new way to express it and perhaps a new way for you to hear it or read about it. But what we're talking about are so deeply ingrained ideas. I mean, lots of people are writing about this, and here you are expressing it, and here I am expressing it. So I love that it's a journey of love, it's a journey of compassion, it's a journey of self-acceptance, it's a journey of elevating ourselves individually so we can do better. We can do better for the people we love, and we can do better for the world and our planet.
Yeah, and so as you're talking about, I was thinking of that before you even said it. So that's just great because I thought suffering is a wake-up call. Because
Mhm.
when we're not, then we're just in this state where things just go by, our life goes by, and sometimes we're trapped in this like comfort zone. And it's that suffering that wakes up. So the tower, I think that's an excellent example that like catches us off guard, but that's the lesson there. That's the wake up call. It's like maybe changing things, maybe don't continue this way, or maybe look for new challenges. And that's been from suffering. I've learned the greatest lessons that have helped me throughout. And as artists, as writers, that's when you produce your best work as well, right? So it brings out this resilience, this strength, this beauty that rises up. And or again, that's I think a choice where we just let it get us down and don't do anything about it or fall into a pit, which is fine again because then we can always get out as well. So it's this amazing thing that happens to us, and we shouldn't immediately or prematurely judge it as again something bad or everything is awful, but keep that hope alive. And in Shawshank Redemption, hope is a good thing. I love that quote. It's like like whatever happens to you,
Yeah.
hope is a good thing, and we should never lose sight of that.
Yes, hope is our daily walk. That's how I see it. It really is. It really is. I there's a chapter in my book where I talk about loss, right? Loss.
Yeah.
That's painful. And
Mhm.
I grew up, I was born with one leg shorter than the other. And when I was 9, my parents decided to lengthen the shorter leg so that they would be equal. I was wearing like a 2.5 inch lift on my shoe. Well, long story short, the surgery was a failure and I became more disabled. I basically lost the use of my left leg that was normal originally, and I can still walk, but it pain, I've lost the use of my knee, my foot, a lot of complications. And I, at one point, guidance was like, what does loss offer? Right now, I wrote this in my, I wrote, this is, from my book, I wrote about this. I may never be able to reconcile that loss, but I started to wonder what that loss brought me in my life. Like, what is that? Right? Because I could have remained, oh, woe is me, and resented my parents and
Mhm.
all that, and been angry at the doctors who screwed up and gone. I was 9, and between 9 and 12, I was in and out of hospitals. My life completely changed as a kid. And so I started to think, well, what did loss bring me? Well, you know what I discovered was that I am very resilient to loss.
Mhm.
I'm extremely resilient. And when I was younger, this came to me, as I think even as I was writing the book, which was maybe, the last 6 years, right? So in my 60s, I finally like figured this out. But during my lifetime, people would be like, even a friend, this is a chapter in the part of the story in my book. I lost a bracelet once with a friend. We were on the train in New York, where I grew up. She just lost her stuff about it. Like, oh my gosh, we should have stayed on just a bracelet. And
Mhm.
I was like, it's gone. Like, no big deal. Like, let's move on, right? And I have a lot of other examples of that. So I started to think of myself as being kind of odd. Like everyone is, dealing with loss appropriately, and I'm not. Somehow I'm just so cavalier. And do I not have an emotion? Do I not care? But I realized that having lost so young, it really has made me resilient to loss. And I actually like that about myself. I like that a lot. It's not that it prepares me for all
Mhm.
the loss that I have experienced, that I will experience. A good friend just died last week of cancer. These are great losses.
Mhm.
But I have resilience around it. I understand that it's part of life, and it doesn't catch me suddenly going, why did this happen? And I can manage it. I understand it on a very deep
It's
level.
like building those resilience muscles, right? And you need to experience it, and the more you experience it, the stronger you get. And I think that's hugely important because that not many people have it, and like the smallest thing would like be like an obstacle that they can't overcome. But then once you have those resilience muscles, you're like, well, okay, yeah, I lost the bracelet, big deal, right? And I think that
Right.
approach is much healthier and much better and much wiser than somebody who would just lose it over something like that, which is again in the grand scheme of things, it's just something material and you can
Yes.
always gain it back, right? But there's
Yeah.
also other losses that we can't gain back and grief and loss, but well, that is part of life. That is how the game is played. You can't change
That's
that.
right. That's right. Nobody's going to stay here forever,
That's right. Yeah.
It's just what it is. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
Mhm. But I find also when you can tap into your intuition, when you
Mm.
can be mindful and aware, and you mentioned awareness, which I think is very important. There's so much out there. There's so many messages out there that we don't perceive, we don't see, we don't hear, and it's constantly guiding us. Now, I found in many cases I don't even need the tarot cards anymore because there's so much
Mm.
out there, like synchronicities and signs and this and that. I just didn't see it before because I was not aware of it. I didn't perceive it. I wasn't ready for it. I didn't say yes to it. And this is very, very helpful because it's sometimes there are decisions made that seem completely just out of the world. You just the worst thing you can do, but it turns out to be the best thing. And I was guided by that intuition, by that gut feeling, and it's always been correct. It's always been for the best.
Oh my gosh, I am so in line with what you're saying. Intuition really, I'm trying to figure out the best way to say this, but like you, when I started to pay attention
Mhm.
and trust my gut,
Mhm.
my world changed
Mhm.
completely.
Mhm.
And part of that change is that I also think, and I'm generalizing, but as a human being, we need to rationalize everything. I'm
Mhm.
making
For
this
sure.
decision because X, Y, and Z.
Mhm.
What I learn about my own intuition and what I teach others about intuition when they come to some of my classes is that it's not necessarily a rational thing.
Mhm.
You can rationalize your decision, it's not a problem, or you can rationalize why this happened, or etc. But really, intuition is if we pay attention, if we can pay attention to how it feels in our bodies, for those of us who can connect to that, it's talking. It's
Mhm.
very clear.
Mhm.
And when we go against it, when we go against our intuition, for me, it feels like I'm a clam and I've just like been swallowed up.
Mhm.
But when I go with my intuition, it feels, I keep using that word expansive. It feels expansive and it feels like I'm saying yes
Yeah.
to something that's right for me, regardless of whether I can rationalize it. It's kind of like when people say, I just had that feeling. Yeah, that's
It
it. I
feels
just
right.
had that.
Exactly.
Yeah,
It
it
feels
feels
right.
right. That's
Mhm.
right. And
Yeah.
and you know, people around you may go, well, you're crazy. I mean, I quit a job once, a
Mhm.
really good paying job, because everything in me was like, no, this is not good for me. This is not working for me. And everybody I didn't have, like, they're asking, like, how are you going to support yourself? What are you going to do? I mean, they wanted, the rational kind of, what's your plan? What's your step? I had no clue. I just knew that it was time to go.
Yeah.
And you know what? It all worked out.
Good.
Within 2 weeks, I had another job. I mean, it worked out.
Yeah.
See that time and time again. Does
And
that,
sometimes, yeah,
is that your experience too?
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I find like when I'm trying too hard, because we get tense when I'm trying too hard to get a job, I'm trying to achieve something, and then it doesn't work out. But then the moment I relax, like you say, then suddenly it just happens. I'm like, what? I didn't have to put an effort in there. It just came to me. But it's that kind of a willingness again of relaxing, of letting go, of trusting the path, the universe, and so on, that things will work out. But again, it's not. I think we have to be active. I think we have to take action. I think we have to work hard. And I mean, I grew up in Germany, so working hard for me is comes naturally. But I think it's also knowing when to stop. And in Chinese, they have the expression "wu wei" of like acting
Mhm.
but not acting at the same time, letting things flow and going with the flow. I think that is hugely important too.
Absolutely. It's a partnership. You're absolutely
Mhm.
right. It's not just like saying, oh, everything will come to me just because I believe the universe is benevolent and so loving. No, it's a partnership. I do my work, I
Mhm.
do what I need to do, and then the universe can do what it needs to do for me. It's a definite partnership. It's not just about praying and then sitting in my hands and waiting for
Yeah,
something to
yeah,
happen.
exactly.
I
Yeah,
have I work hard, I
uh-huh.
do my part,
Yeah,
and maybe working hard isn't really the right. I work with ease, honestly, more
yeah,
and more
that's true.
because of what I've
Yeah.
been taught. I work with ease, but I work and I
Yeah.
get the job done, and wonderful things happen. It's true.
Yeah,
It's
and again, just the idea of karma, and I think even we don't see it immediately, but like when you do good actions, it does pay off. Again, you're not doing it because you want it to pay off, but it's something a natural process, and you want to do more of that. And the more good we do, the more it comes back. Sometimes even more than what we put in. Right? It's the best investment you can do by choosing to be kind and good to yourself as well as to others.
correct. And I liked what you said about, like signs and symbols and synchronicity and things happening. That really changed my life when I started to look at that. When I moved to uh, Eugene, Oregon, which is where I live now, I met a wonderful tarot reader, Claudia Leone, who has long passed. We became friends. And she was also, she called herself a psychic. I don't particularly like that word for myself. I think that word kind of conjures things that I don't really want to deal with, but that's okay. She used that word. She channeled. wonderful information as well. It was always loving. It was never negative. She was a beautiful person. And she was somebody who showed me initially that this connection with the universe was possible. It was possible.
Mhm.
And because I had no clue. Like, what was that? Channeling? I didn't know what that was.
Mhm.
And she was the one who taught me. She was like, there are always messages coming if you just ask. Just ask the universe for a message. And that started to kind of open I didn't know I was going to start channeling, but it did start to open my perceptions, I would say, about the world at large, right? And one of those initial interactions I had, and it's like what you're saying, it's about saying yes. It's about starting to look for those signs and those symbols. And one of the initial things that happened, I remember sitting on a log in the middle of this river. It was blue sky, trees surrounding. It was beautiful, and there was nothing. It was clear, no clouds, nothing. And I was going through a particularly hard time. And I remember saying and it was a very transformative time. I had just broken up with someone. It was one of those times, right? And I was not in a happy place. And I remember asking the universe, I said, okay, I'm going to try this. Send me a message. What do I need to know? And right across my eyesight, there was nothing. There were no birds, nothing. A butterfly went from one side of the bank along this beautiful blue sky to the other side of the bank. And I couldn't have missed the message of change, transformation, just sit with it. There's beauty.
It
If
couldn't be any clearer, right?
it
So
couldn't have been
that's
any
like, yeah, exactly.
exactly. And I have a million of those stories, and I'm
Yeah,
sure you do
for
too.
sure. Yeah.
And that's fun. I always say to people when I'm uh, kind of offering them opportunities to become more intuitive.
Mhm.
I always say, play with it. It's fun, really play with those. And if you take the word, um, I think Deepak Chopra says, what does he say about coincidences? They're like I don't know, I forget, but he uses the word, but it's also like meant to be or something,
I simply
coincidences.
say they don't exist. Coincidences
Yeah,
don't exist,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
I just thought, okay, I'm gonna use that word at all because,
Okay. Yeah.
it's there's a lot going on. It's not just a quote, a
Yeah.
coincidence. Yeah.
I think one of the problems that nowadays too, but throughout time, is self-love. I think so. It's like misunderstanding of that too, because self-love is not being selfish, and there's that distinction, and also like we seem to be caring with our friends and like family members when we give them advice, like don't worry about this, things will work out. You're a good person, you're noble, and so on. But when it comes to ourselves, and again, personal experience too, we kind of attack ourselves so much and think we're also not worthy of things. And I think, but once we change that perspective and we say, yes, I'm worthy. Yes, I'm gonna love myself because not just for myself, but because I'm gonna help others more. I'm gonna love others more. So that kind of whole everything is interconnected. And no, it's the opposite. Those who are selfish don't love themselves. I think that's the issue they're having. So they need to love themselves.
I love what you're saying. Absolutely. I agree. As a matter of fact, I find myself saying what you're saying to clients a lot of times. I mean, being selfish is not self-centered.
Mhm.
And, it's about being, I mean, in terms of, I mean, well, if someone is selfish, obviously they can be self-centered. But my point is that when we work on ourselves, when we
Mhm.
take time to love ourselves, to
Mhm.
be more in tune with ourselves, that is, as you're saying, that's not selfish.
Mhm.
That really is, and what's interesting about that for me is how many people, because I see this, don't trust themselves enough. You were talking about
Yeah.
self-trust,
Yeah.
to trust that if they work on themselves or they take that time, it's almost like they don't trust themselves. They feel like they will become selfish, or it already is selfishness. And as you're saying, they don't see the larger picture. So I always I always remind people who start to tell me this that, you are already a compassionate, loving person.
Mhm.
Working on oneself isn't going to suddenly take that away.
Mhm.
It's not suddenly going to make you an egomaniac or someone who's so selfish that they can't see the world or other people the way
Mhm.
you see them now. That's not what happens. What happens is what you described. that you become more loving, more interested in people, more compassionate. Exactly. So I think taking that time, taking that time is so important. And whether that means that you are quiet, you talked about relaxation. I think sometimes when we all get to the point where we can feel really twitterpated, we're tense, whatever it is that's going on, we've been triggered, we're not having a good day. I find for myself, if I am really feeling that, and sometimes I'm not aware of it, it might take me a day or two or three. And then finally, I'm like, whoa, I'm just carrying this energy that feels just terrible. I'll set a timer for 10,
Mhm.
even 10 minutes, 15 minutes,
Mhm.
and I'll sit and I will just sit with it. It's not about not trying to, it's just about accepting what is.
Mhm. Mhm.
But we talked about suffering earlier. It's actually through that suffering that
Yeah.
I'm feeling um, that I then want to release it. I want it to go.
Mhm.
And I find different ways. We all can find our ways, but I find different ways to do that.
Mhm.
And that's when so there I am taking time to love myself more. And then I feel better. I'm nicer to my husband. I'm nicer to everybody else. I'm not, anymore yelling at the customer service lady,
Yeah.
who I do apologize for when I do that, too. But it's really about just taking that time for ourselves. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And so, what I mean, my question is actually, what is channeling? I mean, I'm familiar with tarot cards, and I've had a few people who talked about channeling. But what is it for you? What's the practice? How can you prepare for it? And what are some advantages or maybe potential pitfalls too when we're trying to do that? What would you say to our audience and to me as well as advice?
Yeah, I think that channeling, there are different types of channeling. There's a great book called The Science of Channeling by Dr. Wabe, and she is, I think, the research I hope I'm getting this right. I don't have the book in front of me, but she's the research director for the Institute of Noetic Science.
Mhm.
And they're doing a lot of research on channeling. So there's a lot of different types of channeling, right? There's trance channeling where you don't remember what's going on. There's people who are call themselves mediums, where that gives the idea that you're actually talking to people who have passed over.
That I'm
Uh,
familiar with. Yeah.
yeah, it goes on and on and on. Psychics who will predict the future. I've heard many stories of accurate psychics telling you this is going to happen, and sure enough, it does. So, and others, I don't need to go all into it, but I personally started to, I don't know, I can't even remember how this started, but for me, I remember what they call automatic writing.
Mhm. Mhm.
Like I was hearing a voice and I thought, oh my gosh, I should get a pen and paper. And so I knew that voice wasn't mine.
Mhm.
Can't tell you why. I knew
Okay.
it wasn't my mom like yakking at me, or giving me stuff to do or telling me how to do it.
Mhm.
And I took a pen and I was writing, not in my own handwriting. And I remember feeling a little fuzzy,
Mhm.
like I wasn't in my body, but I was also aware. And I went with it. You talked about
Mhm.
saying yes. I went with it.
Mhm. Good.
That's how I got all these messages. Well, I now, I don't know if I'm answering this correctly, but I can channel now. I can receive messages. My channeling, what I'm saying is I receive information, messages about myself for other people, clients. I don't just, not just going to open up and say, "Oh, here's what I got for you." I just feel I have more, that's boundary issues. I'm not like that. But the point is, if a client asks, I'm like, okay, I get information. How do I get this information? Now, that's the $1 million question for me. And a lot of people want an explanation for that. And have asked, I asked for a name originally. They were like, names of vibration. You can call us Sally, you can call us Martin, we don't care. And I suddenly was like, guidance. Yep, just means help. Okay, I'm
Yeah.
there. That's fine, you're helpful. But my point is that to this day, and I've been doing this 30 years now or more, I just live in the wonder of it.
Mhm.
And I feel that if that I don't need to contain it, I don't need to, we talked about rationalize it. I don't need to figure out how it's
Understand it even. You don't need to understand it, right? It's
understand it,
yeah,
figure out how it's coming,
yeah,
why it's
uh,
coming.
yeah.
And the other, so I live in the wonder of it. And I believe for me, that keeps me open and available.
Mhm,
Question, something I've learned is that also too from clients, right? Noticing that people have a hard time, a lot of people have a hard time with I don't know. I want to know and I don't know.
mhm,
And what I've been, and that I don't know space. Oh, I should know. Like, I don't know. What should I do? I don't know. I don't know. And what guidance taught me is that those questions I don't know are actually an expansive invitation to know. And so
oh,
rather than thinking, oh, I'm lost because I don't know, just keep saying, I don't know. You're basically telling yourself and the universe and anyone who's going to listen that you want to know, and the answers will come. So
yeah.
I like to keep an open channel to
Mhm,
what this is. I like to live in the place of I have no idea what's going on, and
yeah,
I'm good with that.
yeah.
Now, for me personally, um, I channel in many different ways. I
Mhm,
can go into trance, I can be conscious, I still can automatic write. I have predicted people's futures. Don't tell anybody that. I have talked to dead people. Don't tell anybody that because I don't advertise that. It's not what I want to do.
yeah,
I also talk to animals. I've gotten information from animals. Don't ask. I don't know how it works, but it's been accurate because I get feedback right from their owners. So it's all possible. It's just that I only think it's all been possible for me because I stay open to whatever this is,
mhm,
whatever is going on. And when you asked, could it go wrong? I'll tell you this story. I had been channeling for a while. In other words, reading, I still use tarot cards. I love them. But when people come to me now, they mostly get information from the universe. And you'll be maybe interested in this. What I get, and then I look at the cards, they line up pretty close.
yeah, yeah.
It's
That is
pretty
perfect.
awesome.
Yeah,
It is pretty awesome. It's like
yeah.
why is tarot working?
Mhm,
I have
mhm.
no idea.
I
But
see it as a tool. I mean, if you have
yeah,
a direct connection with it, then you don't need the tool anymore. You can
yeah, exactly.
just get
Yeah,
it.
I mean, I can
Yeah, yeah,
exactly. So there it is. It's like this connection that I had, and I was using it with clients, reading
mhm,
tarot, but channeling information about them. And I remember sitting at my kitchen table. A client was coming over, and and I've been doing this for a while, and I thought, oh my gosh, what if I've opened to something that is negative, harmful,
mhm, mhm,
um, oh, not so great? What have I brought in, right? And immediately the voice said, well, you've been doing this work anyway for like 20 years. It's
yeah,
always been love. It's always been, do you think suddenly you're
yeah,
going to get
yeah,
like the devil or I don't know, call it whatever you want?
yeah,
And I just went, oh, okay, I can trust. I can trust.
yeah.
Now, for some people, if they're wanting to learn how to do this or open up or however they see it, if you feel like you need protection, protect yourself.
Sure.
Just say, for my higher good. I mean, there are ways to do that.
Mhm,
But for me, and I'm sure for you too, because it's been just such a loving, trusting source,
mhm,
I'm not bringing in, I don't want to bring in anything that
mhm,
is just terrible. Like I can't even think about what it would be.
mhm,
Evil? Yeah, I
mhm.
cannot. Do not want to go there.
Yeah, I like how what you're saying also about I don't know, and people are afraid of even admitting that often. And for me, my favorite phrase is "who knows," because and kind of playfully, it's like "who knows?" Well, I don't, right?
Love that.
But as I'm thinking of this, I'm thinking as this universe and like the guidance and so on as a cloud that is there, like as a cloud, like a technological cloud, right? And we can download the information if we connect to it, and if we trust it and have faith in it, and do what you're saying, some of these practices. So that can really help us be in touch with it and then be guided in that sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
I think
wonderful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like not, it's like what's on the other side. I always say it's like what's on the other side of the veil because we do put up boundaries to
Mhm.
this,
Mhm.
through fear, of course. And, there are a lot of things, but when we stop being afraid or we stop um, believing in maybe, the religious practices we had that said that this was bad or whatever it is that blocks
Mhm.
us,
Mhm.
then that veil, it's just, it opens. And
That's
there are
a
many,
firewall. Again, continuing
yeah,
with, I'm not a tech guy, but firewall that's stopping us, right? Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jill Amy Sager. I just want everyone to know you're a tarot reader, you're a channeler, and you explained how you go about it. And you're an author. You're the author of Guidance from the Universe, Hopeful Messages for Everyday Challenges. It's been such a pleasure talking to you here in Narasha's World.
Well, thank you. It was a pleasure talking with you too. Thanks for having me. I hope your listeners enjoy it and find my book. It's actually, I will let you know you can buy it wherever books are sold.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.